It's 1982. A 47-year-old woman is sitting in a doctor's office in Ohio. She's an Air Force logistician. She's run 3 marathons. She eats what she thinks is a healthy diet: chicken, fish, low-fat dairy. She has just been told she has stage 4 breast cancer. It has already spread. Her first words are not, "How do I fight this?" Her first words are closer to disbelief. "Wait a minute, I run marathons. How could I get cancer?" That question, how could this happen to someone who was already trying to be healthy, is the question that changed the rest of her life. Because 4 decades later, that same woman is still alive. Not just alive, she has finished the Kona Ironman triathlon 6 times. She has run the Boston, New York, and Moscow marathons. She has won more than 900 trophies. And she did almost none of it the way her original treatment plan expected her to. This is the story of Dr. Ruth Heidrich. I'm Dr. John Lee, and in 30 years of practicing medicine, I've seen very few patient stories that illustrate the power of a decision the way hers does. Before we get to the diagnosis, you need to understand who Ruth was. She wasn't a health guru. She was a systems engineer who had worked on the F-16 fighter jet program. She'd spent years at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. She held a master's degree in systems engineering, the kind of mind that solves problems with data, not hope. In 1968, she picked up a book called Aerobics by Dr. Kenneth Cooper. She'd never even heard the word before. It changed how she thought about her body. She started running every morning. Within a few years, she'd worked her way up to marathons, 3 of them completed, finished before her diagnosis. By any conventional measure in 1982, Ruth Heidrich was one of the healthy ones. She was the exception, not the statistic. And that's exactly what made the diagnosis so disorienting. If a disciplined, athletic, 40-something woman who ran marathons could get stage 4 cancer, what did healthy even mean? That's the open loop I want you to sit with for a moment, because we're going to come back to it. What Ruth didn't know yet, what she was about to spend the next 2 years discovering, is that there's a difference between exercising and being metabolically healthy. She had one. She didn't yet have the other. The standard path in front of her looked like this: a full mastectomy, followed by chemotherapy, radiation, and likely hormone-blocking therapy. That was the conventional protocol for stage 4 breast cancer in 1982, and for many patients, it remains the right and life-saving path today. I want to be very clear about that before I go any further. This is not a story about refusing medicine. It's a story about what Ruth did in addition to what her doctors were already doing. Here's what actually happened. Just days after her diagnosis, Ruth came across a small classified ad in a local paper. It was placed by a physician named Dr. John McDougall, who was running a research study and looking for breast cancer patients willing to try a dietary intervention alongside their care. Ruth called him. She sat down with him for about 2 hours. In that conversation, McDougall, a licensed physician, not a wellness influencer, walked her through the research linking diet to hormone-driven cancers like hers. Ruth, remember, was an engineer. She thought in evidence, and what she heard made sense to her the way an equation makes sense. She made a decision that night. She was going to change her diet completely. No oil, no refined food, no animal products, whole foods, plants, nothing processed, not gradually, overnight. She also declined the chemotherapy, radiation, and hormone-blocking drugs her surgeon had recommended, choosing instead to work directly with Dr. McDougall's research protocol. I want to pause here, because this is the part of Ruth's story that matters most for you to hear correctly. Ruth had access to something a lot of patients don't: an actual physician overseeing her care and monitoring her disease. This was not a woman who walked away from medicine into the unknown. It was a woman who found a doctor whose approach she believed in more than the one she'd been offered, and who stayed under medical supervision the entire time. That distinction matters. If you or someone you love is facing a cancer diagnosis today, please don't walk out of this video thinking the lesson is skip your oncologist. The lesson is something else, and I think it's actually more useful. It's about what you have the power to add to your care in partnership with a doctor, not what you take away from it. Ruth says the first physical change she noticed happened almost immediately. She describes waking up the next morning and noticing her chronic constipation had simply disappeared. Small thing. But for an engineer who trusted evidence, it was a signal that something in her body was responding. She kept running. Through her diagnosis, through her recovery, she never stopped. And then something happened that she says she didn't plan for. She caught an Ironman triathlon broadcast on television during her recovery. Now, you have to picture this. This is a woman recovering from stage 4 cancer, watching some of the fittest athletes on earth swim 2.4 miles, bike 112 miles, and run a full marathon back to back to back. Most people would have found that intimidating. Ruth found it clarifying. She decided right there that she was going to do that. She added swimming. She added cycling. She trained the way she'd approached every problem in her engineering career, systematically, relentlessly, one variable at a time. 2 years after her diagnosis, 2 years, Ruth Heidrich crossed the finish line of the Kona Ironman triathlon. She is believed to be the first known vegan to ever complete it. What came after is almost hard to summarize without it sounding exaggerated, so let me just give you the numbers as they are. She went on to finish the Ironman 5 more times. She completed 67 marathons, including Boston, New York, and Moscow. She won 8 gold medals at the U.S. Senior Olympics. Runner's World magazine named her Runner of the Year. She was recognized as one of the 10 fittest women in North America. Over her career, she has won more than 900 trophies. She later went back to school and earned her PhD in nutrition and exercise science, turning her own case into a lifelong subject of formal study. She's written multiple books, including her memoir, A Race for Life, and she appeared in the 2011 documentary Forks Over Knives, where her story reached millions of people for the first time. She's now in her late 80s. She has been cancer-free for over 4 decades. She still trains. I want to be careful with you here because I'm a physician before I'm a storyteller, and I owe you honesty over inspiration. Ruth Heidrich's story is one woman's documented experience. It is not a clinical trial. It does not prove that diet alone cures stage 4 cancer, and no responsible doctor, including me, would ever tell you to decline chemotherapy or radiation based on one person's outcome. However remarkable, cancer is not one disease. It behaves differently in every body, and what worked for Ruth is not a promise for anyone else. But here's what I don't think we should throw away either. Ruth did 3 things that any of us can learn from regardless of what health challenge we're facing. She sought out a second, well-informed medical opinion instead of accepting the first path handed to her. She made one decisive change instead of 100 small hesitant ones, and she never let a diagnosis become the ending of her story. She made it the beginning of a new one. At 47, most people would have understandably scaled their life down after a diagnosis like hers. Ruth scaled hers up. She didn't just recover 40 years later, she's still finishing races most people a third her age wouldn't attempt. If there's one thing I want you to take from Ruth's story, it's this. Your diagnosis, your age, your setback, none of it has to be the final chapter. It can be the chapter where you finally start asking better questions about your own health and start partnering with your doctor instead of just following instructions. If this story moved you, there are more like it. Real people, real decisions, real second chapters right here on Everyday Health Hacks. I'll see you in the next one.